All right. We are officially recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last meeting, last public meeting of 2021 into 2022 already. I can't believe this year is behind us at this point. This is the Kubernetes Steering Committee meeting. So if you are in the right spot for governance, hello. If you're not, go ahead and click off. We do have a code of conduct today. Please be excellent to each other. If anybody does have any issues, please feel free to DM me or email conduct@kubernetes.io. Also, if we have a note taker, I will also be taking notes too, but if there's anybody on the line that would like to help us take notes, that would be most wonderful. And I'm also going to be keeping an eye out for Zoom chat. And let's get right into it. So first things first on the agenda, we do have a very jam-packed agenda today. So I apologize to any community members here that are coming in to add something to the agenda. We are now full, but please feel free to add any agenda items to the very end of it so that we can keep track for our next meeting. Please, I definitely would still like to encourage folks to add things to the agenda, even though it's full. And so first things first, we do have a really quick vote that we need to get down and add our LGTMs into the issue. This is the issue for liaisons for committees. So steering members can take a quick moment to either LGTM or add in any comments. Are there any steering committee members on the line that do not want to LGTM and would rather comment now or open discussion? It looks like we've got a bunch of LGTM, so I have a feeling this will be approved.
Yeah, so I 4 by my count right now.
Yep. All right, we're good to go on that one. Thank you very much, committee.
Well, can someone do an official LGTM approve so we can merge that? We'll cancel. Thank you.
Thank you, y'all. All right. Next topics, we do have an artifact hub issue that's been sitting there for a minute. What else needs to be done here? Is this done? Bob, is this sitting on you? What's going on with this?
It's sitting on me. I just need to actually log into the account and do it.
Okay.
I'll take it as an AI for this week.
Is there anything that needs to be else that needs to be done with this issue before we close it? All right. And then the next one is a very big issue that's been there, that's been sitting in community for a long time, which is the chair responsiveness issue. We've done a number of different things with this initiative, and I would like to ask steering, because it does have a steering committee label on it. When is this done? Is this done? What actions do we as steering need to take from this?
So I would say a few things. I think, one, we've got the annual reports, which did not exist, I think, at the time that this issue was created, which provides visibility around what SIG leads are up to. I think that, since we created this, we've also started to do the leads meetings. It was, as Bob's mentioning in the chat, this was pre-steering liaisons as well. Liaisons have been shuffled and rebalanced across SIGs, working groups and user groups, and now committees. I think that, to faithfully close this issue, we should just kind of scan through the comments and make sure that we kind of knocked out all of the things that we said. Otherwise, this will stay open forever. So I think if we get someone to take points on kind of thumbing through each of these issues.
Can I get a steering committee member assigned to this so we can thumb through and potentially close and or open up new issues? Bob, wow. Hey, Bob.
All right.
All right, Bob. All right, Bob. So you've got Artifact Hub and chair responsiveness. All right. All right, next section, we have to assign some owners and assignments. One is to run down the CNCF contributor travel funding stuff. figure out where we last left off. Eeyore's on the call right now. And then we also have lead training to get a quote, start funding process. And then we also have the sub projects in SIG's YAML issue. Any comments from steering or anyone that wants to work on any of those three issues?
I'm interested in the sub-projects out of date one that is connected to some of the annual report scanning, sweeping stuff that I was looking at as well.
Okay, that's awesome. Oh, oops, put you on the wrong one. Hold on. Put you on the right one. Here we go, Jordan. Thank you. Anyone want to take the CNCF contributor funding stuff or the lead training things? I can help with the lead training. How about that? Like, so if anybody wants to pair with me, I can do that. I just can't run it by myself anymore.
I'd like to pair with you on it. One question I have is the timeline isn't clear. I don't know that I will get a whole lot done over the next 3 weeks, but I would definitely like, as the year starts, to be putting emphasis on it.
That's fair, and I can do that as well. So Tim and Paris will pair. And then anybody up for the CNCF contributor travel stuff? And I got to look at chat too.
I can hop in there.
Okay. And then since Eeyore's on the line, Eeyore, where did, from a CNCF perspective, where do you think we left off with that? I mean, the last comment kind of has it dangling, but I feel like there was other stuff going on in the background. So that's why I wanted to see if you had any more context.
I don't think that we really had so much stuff going on in the background because like basically we've stopped discussing it approximately the same time when we've stopped doing face-to-face events. Temporarily stopped, obviously. So right now, like the only major change we basically that we have right now is that like we have relaunched our community fund for the scholarships, and currently it's named after DanCon. And basically we have like this brand new community fund initiative targeting our next face-to-face events, including the KubeCon in Valencia and so. So what I can do here, like I can double check with folks from our events team and like folks internally from the CNCF stuff, like what is our current take on this, and keep you posted on this. If you have any specific requirements, or like if you have like any like input or like anything you'd like to discuss right now, I'm happy to do it. Or we can like I can make some kind of like the background work on this one, and we can discuss it at the next steering meeting.
Yep. Well, Stephen is now your point person, so you and Stephen can huddle, and we'll figure out the rest from there.
That's
Perfect.
great.
All right. So we are done with those two sections now. Sergey, I think you were on the line earlier. There you are. Go ahead and give us an update with Docker Shim stuff. Tell us how we can support y'all and what's good there.
So yeah, I already gave update to a few of you, but just to give brief summary, we announced Docker Shim removal, Docker Shim deprecation last year. We plan to remove it this December. Before removal, we ran some survey to ask customers what's left and was they feel prepared, and numbers were quite surprising. Plus, Datadog survey showed that only 7% of their customers migrated yet, and like 96% are still on Docker Shim. So everything points to the fact that like something needs to be addressed here, and we need to work on that as a community. Some comments from survey, like many comments were about documentation unclear, like give me best practice, what exactly I need to do step by step, or give me some documentation for this specific project or for Kubernetes, like whatever project they run on. Those benefits. I also wanted to point out that survey discovered that many customers had a third-party dependency. So like we announced deprecation a year ago, and some vendors just adopted it. And like I know like Datadog for Windows, for instance, was just implemented. and some vendors are not like up to date yet, so it's blocking some customers. Anyway, we discussed these numbers and results in SIG-Note just last week or week before. I think it was last week, yes. And we also SIG-Note believes that we still have time for end user, so we give in another year for end user while 123 is supported. 123.1 with Docker Shim. We believe that the third-party dependency is kind of chicken egg problem. Without firm date, nobody will migrate, and without like we want to resolve it by giving this firm date. And deadline extension unlikely will give us major benefits. It may help some customers, but it may not help community overall because people will be less likely to migrate with extended deadline. So all that said, I also wanted to point out that we still as a community have few things done not ideally, like vendors adapting things very slowly. We have some documentation tasks that we left out, and like it was open for a year, but nobody took it, and we had like few attempts, but it didn't pan out. We have some problem with how we call things, like CRI was just promoted to V1 in 123. Before it was alpha, so we basically saying use alpha, think whatever, like we know it's stable, but we call it alpha, and end users may, I don't know how many end users know about it, but it may be hesitant to use alpha things. And lastly, like Kubadmin, for instance, didn't even announce deprecation, and it still defaults to Docker. So that's kind of like we as a project like Kubernetes ourselves didn't adapt and didn't migrate from Docker Shim. And also promised backup story from Mirandis is in limbo now. There is a code, but there is, as far as I know, no releases or no documentation. So it's also adds to anxiety from customers. But I want to remind the value of CNCF, one of the interpretation of it at least, that we need to, fast is better than slow. We need to move fast and help customer adopt better practices, like container cryo is a better CRI than Docker Shim. So we believe that it needs to happen, like SIG-Note. So in order to do that, we wanted to help customers at least to make some attempt to streamline their migration efforts and help with unknown issues and problems they may have. So we already had a meeting with Celeste, and Bob was there, and like few other people about comms and what task we need to complete if we want to help customers, what we can and cannot do. And out of all this, I wanted to formulate a few asks for steering. So first, I think out of all the tasks we identified, many tasks are documentation tasks that potentially CNCF can help with. Practice shows that out of SIG-Note contributors, for instance, or like random contributors, we didn't get proper results. We tried and like we didn't get all the documentation we needed. So it would be better if CNCF can sponsor writing this documentation and potentially like helping end users with like case studies or like educational series or something like that. Okay, thank you. Also, I think we want to publish some empathy blog to end users. They spoke up. They said that they are not feel prepared, so we need to reply to that somehow. And this message, I believe, needs to go from steering committee. So steering committee needs to tell we're still doing it because SIG-Note architecture thinks it's the right thing to do, and we will help you to through like CNCF engagement, and we'll help you through this documentation updates. Also, I want to make sure that we understand that like 123 will be very popular version for a long time, especially if you forgot something and some customers will be stuck with Docker Shim. So potentially we want to ease end of line for 123 and maybe even extend it proactively. And lastly, I think we need to double down on this issue on community repository, asking about formulating how we announce big things. And I propose some ideas what we can include into this announcement, but I mean, it's a really big issue and needs to be looked at. So I'm done.
Yeah, so my notes from, part with, wearing the steering and wearing the SIG release chair hat. We also had a request from the SIG release side that SIG release send notification and assist with messaging. I strongly feel that, you know, Arch and Node are in the driver's seat here. And the notifications and messaging should primarily come from them. With regards to the release cycle, we are not extending a release cycle. The release cadence has been modified already, kind of across the board, to give buffer time for exactly these kinds of situations. So like, at least from the SIG release perspective, I don't plan to, I don't think we'll plan to extend a release or end of life.
I guess I'll take as far as the commitments goes from we do have commitments from the CNCF already. I don't know if it's been acted by Chris A on the tracking issue, but I can dig that up. But yes, they are. Celeste is helping, and then I forget. I'm totally blanking on his name. I'm sorry. The other big tech writer from the CN. Yes, thank you.
Nate.
Nate will be helping as well to help coordinate all the updating of the documentation.
So an additional upside, Nate is actually on the release team, and I believe he plans to also be on the release team for 124. So that'll be a pretty tight interlock there. Josh, just to address your note in chat, talking about extending the release cycle, not the release length, but the patch period. We've already extended the patch period to allow for maintenance mode.
And then Christoph, you're the last one on this topic, and then let's wrap it up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make clear a point, like the Sergey, like I think from the steering side, we support SIG release and SIG Arch and the other groups here for making SIG-Node, for making the decisions that you are as far as like deprecating this. But I think from a communication standpoint, just for clarity's sake, like steering committee doesn't typically take on technical decisions. They're like very specific technical decisions, like all those are delegated out to community groups to make those decisions. So we support you, but also I don't think we're going to take lead in any of these communication pieces and say like steering is saying we're doing this, because I think that's not the pattern that we typically follow in the community. So we do support you, but the way that we're supporting you is backing you up in the forums that like SIG-Node and SIG Architecture and SIG Release can like make a decision like this on their own.
So sorry, Paris, can I jump in real hot?
Let's go.
So yeah, we also, the SIG Release leads have a sync on Mondays. We discussed the Docker Shim stuff as well. I think what we can do in terms of messaging, or what we should do in terms of messaging, is take a very proactive stance in terms of like making sure the deadlines are hit, and with the stick being that the release will not go out unless these docs are right, the release notes are right, like people are prepped for it. Like I think this is one of the situations that it does make sense for SIG Release to block a release if it is not up to snuff.
So to be clear, that would be the 124 release when it's actually removed. Is that right? Am I understanding it correctly?
Right.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm also going to take an AI to work with the end user community for CNCF and make sure that this is on their docs and work with Bill. So, all right. Sergey, sorry to rush you. We have a tight agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Josh, you're next with election stuff.
Okay, a bunch of election stuff, mostly issues that shouldn't be too hard for steering to decide. So we've already had the election retro. If you missed it, you can see the notes. First question is an issue that came out of the last year's election retro, that was never resolved one way or the other. And I just want to make sure that steering wants to keep the rules the way they are. This concerns how we handle things when we actually have to implement representation limits. Currently, the way the process works is if you have to implement representation limits because of a group of 3 people, one of whom was elected the previous year, you filter one of the newly elected people based on preference voting, right? One of the things that we inquired last year is whether or not we wanted to give a chance for all of the members of that organization to meet and decide themselves who would drop out, particularly in the case of, for example, an incumbent steering member who was having trouble keeping up. I just want to close this issue one way or the other. If we think the way that we do it now is fine, and we don't want to change it, then let's just have somebody from steering say so and close the issue. And if we do want to revise it, then I can come up with some revision language.
I can take point on this since it's near and dear to my heart.
Okay. So yeah, either way, because just right now it's just open and it keeps getting extended because nobody said anything one way or the other. The other 2 issues should be rather more straightforward. The first one is the steering committee candidate criteria. Currently, there is no requirement that somebody be qualified to vote in order to run for steering. And within the last 2 elections, that has run into a situation where we had a candidate who was not able to vote for themselves. That was weird. It didn't necessarily end up being, some kind. It was not like a technology or process problem for the election, but it did seem very weird. And wanted to raise with steering whether or not we should continue having that criteria or whether we should require that a candidate be qualified to vote, whether via contributions, committee membership, or exception.
I personally feel like a candidate should be eligible to vote and run, and that the voting eligibility should be some subset of the candidate eligibility.
Christoph?
So the way things are right now is intentional, at least as far as for historical reasons. That doesn't mean we can't change it, but just to kind of bring some of that historical context, when the Bootstrap Committee was discussing those like initial criteria parameters for like who can run and who can vote, the thought was you can restrict who votes, you can restrict who can run, you can restrict both, but both may be unnecessary. And in particular, the thought process behind the current requirements are there may be candidates that are not necessarily directly inside the community that may that there may be a reason that the community wants to bring in somebody from the outside, whether that's they want outside perspectives or such. So the restriction that was initially placed is restricting who can vote, was like a clearer line to draw, but then leave the candidacy piece open, and that anybody can end up running if they can show that they have nominal support through the nominations process. But yeah, anybody can run, but then kind of restricting it on the voting side to determine that like the community itself is determining who its leaders are, whether those leaders are from the inside or the outside. So with that context, I'll say my personal thought is I like that original context. And my current thoughts are we should leave things as is, even if it might seem weird on the surface. I think there's like good reasonings behind why it is the way it is.
Bob, and then we're going to move on to the next election retro item. And then steering, please weigh in on the issue that Josh has set after.
My personal gut take is that the people that are running should at least be an org member. This essentially requires them to at least be on our mailing lists and keep up to date with the community, which, you know, isn't necessarily the same as our current voting requirements, but at least ensures like a very low baseline to be informed with the community. And if we wind up not going with this option, or like, you know, further restrictions in terms of being a potential voter to be able to run as a steering committee member, we should at least take the historical context and PR that in some place, because the question has come up now multiple times.
All right. So steering, since it's the first time that we've seen this issue, please vote on the issue. And if it's not voted on by the time we get to our next meeting, we'll add it to our meeting log under vote and we'll vote there. Cool. All right. What's the next one, Josh?
Okay. The other one is a little bit more straightforward, in a little bit more obvious in terms of people being for it, although it looks like we need to actually refine the criteria, which is one of the things that we've noticed over the last several elections is there are certain groups within the community that are active participants in the community in a way that doesn't show up on GitHub. One of the paramount examples being the Code of Conduct Committee. And we end up processing a lot of exceptions for those folks. So the original proposal from the election officers was that we automatically include the members of the Code of Conduct Committee and the Security Committee as well in the list of eligible voters, whether or not they meet other thresholds. After that, it got suggested to kind of expand that to anyone who is mentioned in sigs.yaml. Any of which would be fine. We're just basically, my worry obviously is putting somebody in the position of asking for an exception every year can result in them failing to do so or failing to do so by the deadline and then not being able to vote. So it would be, if we know they're going to ask for it every year and it's going to be granted, we might as well put them on the list of voters.
Stephen, we have room for one steering comment, and Stephen, you have your hand up, and then we'll do the same thing since this is a new issue for us. We'll either vote on the issue, and if we don't have enough votes by the next meeting, we'll vote at the next meeting. Stephen?
Cool. Yeah. So I do feel that at a baseline, the committee members should be included. I think I would be in favor of sigs.yaml if we could guarantee that sigs.yaml was up to date, which means kind of going through user groups and any other groups that may be potentially out of date as a result of, you know, annual reports or some sort of metric that we can find.
Okay, so it sounds like more discussion on the issue then. Final FYI to close out my item, within SIG contributor experience, we're actually forming an election subproject because we need to have some people who are looking at elections issues between steering committee elections, as well as enabling SIGs to run their own internal elections. So you will see that coming as a subproject proposal later on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you so much to the entire election officer committee that we had this go for all your work. Thank you. All right. Next up is our favorite topic, annual reports. And then we've got sustainability plan. I'm clocking like 28 minutes, if that, on the rest of our meeting. So annual reports, we've got a few things. We've got wrap up from last time, and then we've got dates and deadlines, and we've got who's doing what. So first, it looks like most of the wrap up is listed here in the agenda as far as our comments. I don't think we need to necessarily go through each one. But does any steering members have any comments or questions about the wrap up that they would like to discuss here? So it looks like Christoph can put the time in for the generator within the next month. However, we've got some Contribex mentees that might take it further quicker. Jordan and Stephen, do you have any updates yet on the questions or not yet?
I left a comment on there. I had gone through the questions we asked and pulled out about 10 that seemed like we have data for or could derive or pull answers for automatically. I sort of categorized them as like, we should be able to answer this question completely automatically, or we could at least pull out, it's the very last comment. We could at least pull out like a partial answer, like a skeleton, to say like, instead of saying, what are all the kept things you did this year? Be able to say like, we scanned the repo and here's the kept things you did this year. Please like add anything or add color or explanations or things like that, instead of making people go and everybody construct these things manually.
Stephen?
Yeah, and I think Jordan gave a good assessment of on this issue comment. There are some particulars, I guess, for meeting recordings up to date. Like, how do we determine that? We can pull the playlist. We can easily pull the playlist, but like, if the playlist is not up to date, like, how are we getting that data? So I think we can dive into some of these, but I think I really like the way that he laid a bunch of this out.
And Jordan, could you take point on PRing this into the policy, like with maybe any potential changes to the questions that you have here outlined?
Yeah, yes, I can change the questions. Obviously, for anything like this, there's then work to say like, here are the questions we think can be generated automatically. Here's the ones that only a human can answer. Do we want to just divide the list to begin with and say like, let's get humans answering questions we know only humans can answer, and in parallel try to work on like spinning out individual efforts to like gather these things and fold them in? Because if we wait until all of this automation is done, like, we'll never get started like actually getting human.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll sort of just divide the list in half and say like, this is stuff we're working on automating.
Yeah.
Please answer these like 5 things or whatever. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that would be awesome. Tim, I see your hand, and Stephen, I see your hand as well. Tim first though.
I'm wondering if this could be initially just a simple thing on the liaisons checklist, something that you're watching for periodically. I question that how much will be automatable, because yes, you can validate the positive case, like in the last 3 weeks there's been something uploaded, but if there hasn't been something uploaded, maybe you have to go back to the meeting calendar and discover that there was a conflict and that meeting was postponed, or there's, in the negative cases, there may be valid reasons, and again, then it's going to be on the human. So maybe a lightweight checklisty thing that the liaisons are supposed to just do regularly.
That would be a good issue. Could you file that, Tim? Thank you. And Stephen?
Yeah, I kind of agree there too. I mean, if you have a recent meeting upload, doesn't necessarily mean it's a recent meeting. Maybe the meeting was just uploaded, but it's a meeting from many months ago or something, right? So staleness is important, but I mean, also what if we were to ask people what they're working on in terms of discovering some of these things, right? So I think there's one around looking for stale owners, and DIMS has been working on that maintainers tool that kind of scans a repo for owners and pops people out, compares it to dev stats, pops people out. Maybe there are other tools elsewhere that we don't know about that people are working on. So what if this was a question as opposed to just we're working on automating it? Maybe you've already done it.
And speaking of, Bob actually has something to the next effect on the agenda. Bob, you're talking about a tool to crawl shared repos.
There was I don't know if there's an open issue for it. It came up in like the mentee Slack and some other conversations regarding scanning the shared repos to basically provide an updated list based off the like SIG labels in the owner's files that could be used to update like sigs.yaml, because a lot of those are out of date. And that would also feed into DevStats, because right now DevStats is inaccurate for shared repos, and when it comes to tracking the SIG specific work. There's a long-standing issue with them. They cannot view PRs and things like that by label. It has to be by like file path for them to associate potential PRs and commits with a SIG.
All right, I've got an action item for you to set that issue.
Okay.
All right. And we also need to wrap up whether or not we care about working groups reporting into their sponsoring SIGs, because the last annual reports netted us the knowledge that most working groups are not giving updates to their sponsoring SIGs. And how we want to deal with this. So I think I think the action should be to take this into a new issue and discuss it there, and then we can discuss it at a later meeting. But Stephen, go ahead. You have a hand up.
Yeah, no, I strongly feel that they should. Otherwise, the sponsorship feels hollow, and it also kind of spreads the work out.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to take an action to take that into a separate issue for us to discuss there and figure out what to do with that. And I know, Tim, you had a big comment on that as well. So I'll make sure to include your comment on the issue as well when we set it. All right. So that takes us to, I'm sorry, okay. Stephen.
I was just going to say, just as a like sort of worst case scenario, like, I mean, if working groups are doing an annual report, tagging their sponsoring SIGs into their annual report. That wasn't really a thing we did last year, but thinking about it, I mean, I think a year is longer than I would prefer, but if it's better than like never, at least saying like every year, like here's our look back and our look forward and what's going on. Also, hey, SIGs that we supposedly like file up to, like, hey, this is what we're doing. Did you know? Do you have feedback? Could be a good starting point.
Yeah. Oh man, my typing skills today are just whack. Hold on. I'm having an issue with notes right now, y'all. All right. And then Stephen, you had your hand up. I'm not sure if you took that down.
It was up for the last one, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure. All right. So that brings us to dates and deadlines for our next go, which, hold on, let me share my screen. So we need to decide pretty much on a couple of major deadlines. So that'll push us to get the rest of this stuff done. So meaning like, I don't know if we want to think about working backwards. Last time we produced it, I think it was in June, which isn't really much of like a year-end wrap up. I think we should publish it no later than March 31st. Does anybody have any comments or just want to start discussion around when we should publish and or start this process? Hello, Stephen.
Hello again. So I'm just thinking about 124 a little bit and how that all already seems like it's going to be a contentious, really, like, are we sure that we want that to be the reports to be published around the time that people are kind of crunching?
And should we bump it up to January?
Of what year?
Of 2022, like that, like January 31st. I feel like, because I think in this project we're always going to have something that we bump up against, whether it's KubeCon, whether it's a release. Like, Bob, you had your hand up.
I was mostly +1 for some time in March. This also, like, one of the big problems we faced with last year in the annual reports is because it extended so long, people kept mixing up the current year with the past year. when it came to things. Like we need people to really start thinking about, you know, what they did in 2021, not 2020, half of 2021 plus half of 2022. It might be actually easier to phrase it as, what did you do in these 3 releases?
Stephen, do you still have your hand up from the last one? And
Sorry.
I see Jordan. Well, now Jordan beat you to it. So Jordan, you go first.
I was just going to say, I think because pretty much everyone has done one of these before, like looking at what they did last year and then looking at deltas, it's going to go quicker, especially if we can take some of the questions and like move them to we should have a dashboard for this, focus on like these questions. I think getting human answers to like the deltas over last year's report should be pretty easy to do like in a month. So targeting January is bananas because like half of the people are either actually gone or like mentally gone for the rest of the year at this point. But targeting end of March seems very doable to me. I would, when we ask people to do this, I would encourage them to say like, look at last year's report, think about like what changed and like what's gotten better, what's gotten worse, highlight those things. Like, I think it'll be less of a lift than it was last year.
Other comments from steering? Even not don't care, just get it out comments. Tim, I feel like you're on the cusp of a comment right now. I can see it. Like,
it's definitely like, I mean, annual's in the name, right? You got to have them happen, and deferring doesn't help, but also you want quality. So I don't know.
All right. So how about this? How about, can we take an AI that we need to have all questions, policy, procedure PR'd in by January 15th. And then January 15th, liaisons start their process with, hey, y'all remember this annual report, right? And then like, you know, maybe we can prepare the liaisons with like a checklist of like what to go over, blah, blah, blah. And then from January 15 until mid-February, that's like chairs getting prepared. And then like we expect it either like we can vote on this at another time, but maybe like end of February or end of March sounds like what we're going to vote on for due date. And then so publication date, we should try to aim for no later than mid-April. All right. Stephen, hand.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say let's chop it up maybe on the issue. Everything else that's good.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Concretely for that first step, like when we have our stuff done, I like January 15th or even earlier. Like I think end of year is probably doable. And that's the one like we may or may not have a chance to meet again like this month. So the dates in the next year we can kind of finagle and discuss, but if we have a crisp date for us, that would be good.
Yep, exactly. So for right now, let's make it Jan 15, but let's try to target end of year, and then we can probably move faster. All right, so Stephen, hand up or down right now?
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. All right. So this part, I won't lie to y'all, the who's doing what, I did not do a good enough job last time because I did much of this myself. So I didn't do a good enough job of like cutting up roles for this, but I definitely think we need roles. I ended up, this took me about 80 hours last year. So 80 hours meaning from prep and outreach and the actual summary. It's too much for one person is what I'm getting at here. So I think we somehow need to cut this down into like who does what. Obviously, we've got liaisons that roll this out to the chairs. But But I'm thinking maybe we have a point person that's doing point for like policy procedure PRs, like making sure that everything's good there. But I think the biggest part was the summary. That took at least 40 hours. And that was really painful. So I don't know how, obviously we don't have to talk about that now. I just wanted to put that on the agenda as something that we need to think about right now. And like how we carry this out and how it's not, you know, a one-person job. Maybe it's a three-person job, whatever it is. But right now I don't have a good enough, like, you know, role summary, if you will, of each of these, or like, you know how we should carve out roles. So I kind of just wanted to discuss with you all right now. A, do you think we could trim out roles from this? B, does that make sense? And C, just how do we cut this work up?
I like Bob's comment. I feel like there was a lot of sort of interpretation and synthesis required last year.
Yeah.
And if we can rephrase questions so that they copy paste more naturally into the summaries, that might save us work.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, this is recording. Yes. And then Bob.
Actually, I think Stephen, your hand up
Steve.
first.
Yeah, I actually have my hand
beat
up.
You to the punch.
So I agree with the copy and paste technique. I think that, you know, the liaisons can handle roll up for their sections. I think that makes a lot of sense. It makes sense to chop up the, you know, prep outreach. I think, you know, having people on point for one prep and outreach, and then multiple for summary.
All right. And we can work on summary stuff once we've got all of our stuff PR'd in, and, you know, our policies, procedures, and questions and stuff like that. Bob?
So one thing that will make the copy pasting easier is like everyone decided to format their reports like in a different way. So like the more we can like sort of provide them a template of how to answer these questions, even just like, you know, making sure like there's bullet points there, will make that process easier. So it might be, in addition to this, just review the template itself for copy pasta ability.
And also the generator as well.
Yes.
All right. And I think we're done there. Any other questions, comments, concerns, discussion points for annual reports? All right. I tried to get through that as quick as possible. Sorry, y'all. Next is sustainability plan. And this is a nice lengthy document that is making its rounds through governing board folks right now. And what I'm trying to do here with this document is determine what the needs are for our project, as far as like what we need go forward, as well as what we need now in order to be both stable as well as sustainable. There's a lot under needs. However, I don't think that this is all of our needs. So I would love if the liaisons can work with their SIGs on what sustainability means for them, and also what it means today, as well as what it means in 5 years. We have a ton of needs right now. However, a ton of the ideas that we have for how to address these needs doesn't even necessarily hit all of those needs. So what I wanted to hear from steering as far as discussion is how we can get all of the information that we need from SIGs in this regard. And if SIGs don't tell us, like for instance, if SIGs say that they're fine, does that mean that these people have a plan, or should we just keep it, and should we keep it moving? Like how much should we get involved here when SIGs say that like everything's good for them?
I think that ties
Stephen?
into the issue I'm opening around documenting the liaison role. If we have some of those criteria defined there in a document, maybe it's more clear.
Stephen, and then Bob.
Yeah, I think to determine whether or not SIGs are good, I think it's less, personal opinion from them and more so what is our baseline of good, right? Is it meeting the standards of the annual report? Is it, something that steering has seen or something outside of the community or within the community that people have seen? Like I'm not sure that we have the baseline to determine what good is yet.
And then Bob?
So my thought was sort of along the same lines in terms of baseline of what is good, but like it's also sort of I would say a gut feeling from the liaison and keeping an idea of what, how the group is, functionally in the community. It might not just be from the liaison, but just sort of like a gut check on how they are interacting with everyone else. And that is sort of the liaison responsibility to keep the, interact with them. And as far as potentially surfacing some of this stuff more, maybe we make it a part of the annual report in terms of what, what jobs, what things people want to see, like where they need, like, I know we have where they need help, but maybe try and get people to flesh it out more. So it could be more integrated into this style of report or style thing that can be fed up, each year.
And then do any steering committee members have ideas for how to get some of these needs covered? So for instance, we don't have time. I mean, we have literally 4 minutes. So I can't go through all of these needs right now, but we've got Kate's infra, SIG testing, contributor experience, docs, cloud provider, release, instrumentation, node, and then also some critical staffing or some critical dependencies that need to be staffed. There's a lot on here. And there's a lot that I think needs attention. Stephen?
Yeah, so I think, part of it is the contributor to kind of maintainer path. A lot of the time that is being spent by maintainers today, I think is being spent on, I think it's maybe wrong to call it minutia, right? But there's a bit of moving things around. So I like seeing the program manager and the community kind of architect roles listed here. But there's also, if I think of just looking at the SIG release stuff, for example, like getting full-time release managers, right? Those are, people who have spent multiple cycles and, getting up to speed with our content and our tooling. So it's like, it's hard to, from the maintainer aspect, it's hard to just like stick someone in there that is immediately going to get it, right? So like, how do I take a contributor? How do I take an existing contributor, bring them up and find a role for someone who's coming in new? It would be my concern as a SIG chair, right?
What if we had a CNCF Kubernetes fellow and their full-time responsibility was releases as well as test infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's potentially workable. It's still a matter of like, what is the level of ramp up time that is going to be able to take them to be effective?
And then, yeah, I'm going to put in a funding request for Kate's infra and SIG testing. They are at a point where new contributors are not getting onboarded. So we need to get them some better documentation and some onboarding programs and some like hand-holding programs with contributors to help them. Any other steering committee members that have discussion topics on some of these needs? Okay. Well, that's it for, oh, Stephen.
I think it would be, I think something, analyzing the some of the boards that we have today with dev stats, right? The time to merge, time to review, things like that. Because again, I do think it's enabling new contributors to hold these like full-time roles is going to be largely dependent on freeing up existing contributors to train them up. Like if it's a matter of like, oh, these issues have not been seen and or haven't been touched in months because no one's doing triage, and because there's an expectation that the chair is doing triage or the tech lead is doing triage, but something's on fire and that's what they're focusing on instead. It's hard to like the triage is it's not easy, but it's a good onboard, right? Okay, something is completely broken, you have to jump in and it's like 2 a.m. is a harder thing to do, right?
I think most of the SIGs that have needs for projects that are like 40 plus hours, like refactoring, reworking something. Like, I mean, I think in Kate's infra, we're officially over budget. And how can we not get over budget again? Well, we can probably do that if we rework Prow, and cut some of the cruft. I mean, that's just an example, right? Like, I feel like all of the needs that have come through are needs that are not getting addressed quickly by new contributors. So I think that's one of the biggest themes that I see with the needs that have come through. Most of them are asking for like full-time type of individuals to be assigned to them. So yeah, right now the ask to the governing board has been, please send us your full-time folks. And I've been doing one-off meetings with individuals like Oracle and many others to try to get more folks onboarded. But as we onboard folks, they're, having an issue getting acclimated into some of the SIGs. So. All right, it's 10:30. We got to wrap this. There's so much more to do on this, but liaisons, please work with your SIGs on making sure that if they have needs that they're addressed, and that we start getting some solutions addressed or solutions assigned to them.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Who's after the private meeting? Who wants to be the next Basone for for January?
I can do it.
Okay, go for it.
All right.
So I'll take both in January.
Okay. All right.
Follow your excellent example, Paris, running a tight ship.
I didn't because like we didn't get to like, the 800 other things that were on the list. So, all right. See y'all. Have a good week.
Bye.